Welcome back to another episode of Important Miscellaneous Talks. I am your host, Glassford Crossfield, and today we have a very, very special guest. I'm excited for this one. Please introduce yourself.
Sabastian Enges, excited to be here.
Jen, go ahead.
Hey, this is Chinadu Masibe. Glad to be here as well.
All right, so Sebastian, talk a little about what you do for those of the people that don't know.
I primarily spend most of my time working as a consultant and performance coach. At this point, I spend most of my time kind of focused there, new ventures, helping companies get off the ground. But I think the last 10 years or so, I built a pretty sizable sales and marketing business that works with clients like AT&T and Amazon and Verizon, big clients like that across the country. But as a functionally, how I show up on the day-to-day is really just focused on coaching and developing people.
So when you're sitting with those big corporations as a performance coach, what exactly do you go over?
Somewhat depends on what their needs are. Most of what I do with the big companies is around executing sales strategies down to a zip code. So how to, market penetration, how to reach more people, how to reach them effectively. So those are most of the conversations at the level, Fortune 500 level. As far as coaching goes, very much depends on the person. Usually it's guys who are doing well but want to do better, or people who are stuck. I seem like I get called in for a lot of people who get stuck in a plateau or at a certain level, or what they're doing no longer is fulfilling to them. They're trying to understand why. So that's, as a performance coach, that's kind of my job, is to figure out why they're stuck and help them get unstuck.
So for someone who's unmotivated and wants to do better in life, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you give them?
Well, you're saying somebody who's unmotivated and wants to do better?
I'm small and I know, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times those guys fall into what I call the lazy, ambitious group, and they're actually pretty scary. And as a whole, I almost don't spend any time with them. And I can usually sniff them out a mile away. They're not unobvious. And so to kind of give you a little bit of clarity, and I'll answer your question because the heart of what you're trying to get to. But the lazy ambitious is somebody who talks a big game. They want more in life, meaning like they have a vision, like they could see a different life for themselves and others. And they generally talk a very big game. And as a result, they can be very convincing and suck people into partnering with them or working with them, or marry them, partner with them. But when you get to who they actually are, there's a whole hell of a lot of other things they value more, and they're not really committed to that end. And so we call them the lazy ambitious, and they're very, very hard. They're very hard to reach because, as one of my organizing principles is we always do what we value most, right? So there is an underlying and undergirding in this person's world of values that they may or may not be more aware of that are more important to them, which is why, even though they can sell the vision, they have really zero desire to put in the work to execute on it. And so they get stuck. And if they're really unaware, they'll think the reason they're not winning is some outside force is trying to punish them. Right? When in fact, it's just they're lazy. And what I mean by lazy, because lazy shows up a lot of different ways. In fact, busyness is a form of laziness. But what I'm referring to is somebody who there are other things they value more that keep them from putting in the work to getting to the next level, to doing what it is they say they're about. And so a part of growing up is you start to figure out who's full of shit and who isn't. And the easiest way to tell is who's actually doing the work. And the work isn't just working, it is doing the work of understanding themselves, understanding what's holding them back, work of learning how to grow and develop, putting, surrendering the illusion of control of others and focused more on the development of the person, taking personal responsibility. So there's phrases and context that just from talking to somebody, it's pretty easy to tell where they're at. just based on the questions they ask and how the phraseology they use. I describe it as like, if you're giving somebody directions to your house, you know where they are based on the questions they're asking. Right? So if somebody calls me, the questions they ask about where they're at is going to tell me how close they are to my house. Well, it's kind of like that with growth and consciousness and awakening. The questions they're asking me tell me where they are in the journey, right? Based on where you are, you're going to ask different questions. So anyway, now as how to motivate people, I'm not really super interested in motivating people. Early in my career, I got pinned as a motivation coach or motivational speaker. And I'd get asked all the time to go, hey, can you go pump up my guys? Can you motivate my guys? And I'd be like, listen, let me help you. The only person I'm interested in motivating is me. I'm not, if you get stuck from a team development standpoint, if you get stuck having to motivate people, you're always going to have to do that. It's like a pump up game. And it's very, very exhausting. We have 250 employees across the country, got 30 offices across the country. It would be very tough if I spent all my time trying to motivate my guys. It's exhausting. So I'm interested in motivating me and then helping teach others how to motivate themselves. And really, motivation is an important part of the game because it kind of kickstarts you, it gets you going. But ultimately, it's discipline and structure, routine, habit that keeps you going. And so that's the bigger part
right now, man.
Well, appreciate it. But if you're always, and here's the thing that really separates a lot of the unsuccessful people from successful people. And by the way, anytime you use the word success, I'm never projecting my view of success on anyone. It's by your own standard, right? Because success is different to different people, and that's totally beautiful and that's totally okay, right? We don't all have the same idea of what we think success is, but whatever success, whatever you're pursuing, right? The difference between those who are successful and those who aren't, successful people are willing to do it when they don't feel like it. And that misses so many people because we think that, and we got this message in our culture right now that's hurting a lot of people and it's empowering a lot of silly behavior, which is follow your passion. And it isn't because that is necessarily not true. In context, that is very true. The issue with it without context is it gets misapplied and misunderstood in such a way that people think that, well, if I don't feel like doing it, I shouldn't. Well, let me help you. I don't know if you guys are parents, but I am. And I can tell you there are times when you don't want to get up and make breakfast or take your kids to school. So if I just follow what I feel like doing in the moment, right, and I follow that ideology, my life isn't going to add up. And there's a lot of people who I coach who genuinely feel this way. I just don't feel the same way about this person anymore. I don't feel the same way about this job anymore. I don't feel very good about doing this workout anymore. Is there something to be said to listening to your heart? Yes. Is there something to be said to listening to your body? Absolutely. But emotions are fleeting. They come and go. And we very often interpret that as what passion is. To be frank, most people don't have a fucking clue what they're passionate about. Right? How many dusty guitars? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. So is that why you say follow your efforts and not your passion?
Exactly.
What does that mean exactly?
When you follow, so going back to this, like we all know somebody or that person that has a dusty guitar or a dusty piano or a dusty pair of rollerblades, or something we thought we were excited about, right? And then it doesn't turn out that way. So what is effort? Well, the easiest example I like to give, because it's one that the most people can relate to, but you contribute it many different ways, is like working out. If you grew up never working out, okay, well, and you go to the doctor and the doctor's like, yo, you got to start working out or, a lot of bad things are going to happen. Your markers are all over the place. All right. So you go to the gym. Well, I'm just going to pretend you've never been before. You have a lot of uncertainty already because you have no idea what the gym has for you. If you decided to hire a trainer to hold you accountable and you got that far, well, now there's concern over, how's he going to treat you? What workouts is he going to make you do? And we overcomplicate in our head what we have to do. Okay. So we get in there. If we were lucky enough to strap in and we get there and we actually start working out and the trainer starts yelling at us, we're not feeling better right there. And not at all. In fact, when you're first starting to work out, your heart is beating out of your chest. You may have a headache. Your brain's telling you, dude, this isn't for you. This doesn't feel good. We don't like this. You may start hearing stories like, hey, maybe I'm just not genetically set up to be in good shape. Like all these stories are going on in your head. And if you know people like, you know exactly what I'm saying. This is not uncommon. You get anxious, you get angry, you may get sad. So you're feeling all these emotions. If you're paying attention to your emotions, you're lost right there. You're not going to make it to day 2 because day 1, your body is not happy. And what's worse is when you get home that night and you look in the mirror, you don't look any different. And when you get up the next morning, you may actually feel worse, not better. Right? So again, if we're paying attention to those indicators, it's really easy to go, oh, maybe this just isn't for me. But we all know how this story ends, right? The discipline, the routine, the structure, the habit, you dedicated yourself, you committed yourself to the process, you keep going. Well, first week, not going to look any better. Probably not going to feel any better. Second week, you may get a little bit more excited, like you know what you're into, but you're probably sore, you're hungry, you're not eating things you used to want to eat, right? Sacrifice, frustration on the front end. But by the 3rd or 4th week, you start looking at yourself like, wow, I look different. I got a line where I used to not have a line. I'm starting to look forward to going to the gym. And then what happens? Now that I have front loaded the effort and I broke through all of the emotional pain and all the frustration and all the story, usually by 30 days, I start to get a result. As soon as I get a result, magically a little bit of passion shows up. And now maybe you're starting to research, better diets. You may be looking at supplements. You may be getting interested in different clothes. And as this pursuit goes on in effort, you become more and more passionate about what it is you're doing. Because it turns out there's a pretty simple, although there are exceptions, it seems, there's a pretty simple formula for what you're passionate about. It also happens to be what you get good at. There seems to be a pretty good corollary there. Well, getting good at something takes effort. It takes real work. And so, again, the best lies are 60% truth. There is truth to follow your passion. Long form, long term, you absolutely, and I believe, will naturally start to gravitate towards things that you're naturally passionate about and excited to do. But if you're sitting around waiting for passion to inform and guide your decisions in your 20s, you're going to be sitting around for a long time.
So I got a question. Yeah, that was bars, by the way, OD.
Thank you.
I got a question. So when you said the lazy ambition, what age range is that normally when you find those people?
I mean, they're all over the spectrum, bro.
Okay.
And they're easier. Now here's where they're easier to find when they're in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. Why? Mm-hmm. Why do you think?
Why do I think? Well, because you could probably tell that their life didn't pan out, though. You can see the lack of ambition in their life.
Exactly. You're like, bro, have you been like this your whole life? Oh yeah, bro. Since I was young, I've been talking like this. So then you're like, all right, thanks for the warning. Because you get at that point, it's like, if you always talk like this, and that isn't to say that people don't make it, and not 40, 50, or 60 is all that old, but it's old enough that if you were taking action, the result is going to start showing up in your life, right? So the hardest time to catch who that is in their like teens and their 20s, because nobody's done shit yet. As a rule, right? There's obviously exceptions, but as a rule, nobody's proven anything yet. So it's hard to know the difference. So what I learned to do is just pay attention to the decisions people are making. I pay attention to their result. Now, early in life, you may not have much of a result on the back end, but I can pay attention to what's your work ethic like? What's your mentality like? What's your personal responsibility look like? What's your personal accountability look like? I could start paying attention to those things, and they become leading indicators of that lasting success.
Got you. Wow.
So a lot of the arguments that people get in early in life is because nobody's proven anything yet. When you start to prove shit out, you get in less arguments because people stop arguing with you. Oh, that business is never going to work. That's a silly idea. Yeah, you'll get that on the front end. But once the business is a success, nobody's arguing with you about whether or not it's going to work out. It did work out. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Oh, that diet won't work. All right. So you go do it. You lose the weight. You keep it off. It did work. Well, nobody's arguing with you anymore. Now they're asking, how the fuck did you do it? But on the front end, if you're waiting for people's permission, you get stuck because you'll start hearing doubt and doubt. Don't listen to doubt. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen to wisdom. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have good mentors to help guide you and direct you. But don't listen to public opinion. As a whole, I learned a long time ago, I don't really take too much praise very seriously or criticism. Neither one of them are terribly helpful to me.
Got you.
So as I know you said you have a big team in different cities and different offices. So I know you're scouting out your employees and the partners that you work with, and I'm sure, just following the 80-20 rule, there has to be some in that bunch that doesn't perform on a level that either you like them to or the level they can. Do you meet them where they're at? And I know you say don't like to motivate them, or do you motivate them to get them where they need to be?
Yeah, it's a great question on many levels. So yes, Pareto's principle seems to apply everywhere. I haven't found a whole lot of exceptions to it, so much so that you can formulaically make decisions off it on many levels, which brings up a lot of really interesting, unpopular topics, of course, but I think it's in play. So yes, within my business, not everybody has the same level of productivity. How we manage that as a whole is I have pillars in my business that I operate from. And so the performance side of our business, which is largely oriented towards sales, on the sales side of the business, the pillars are competition, systems, and standards. And I use those three pillars to coach and train and develop my people. And standards put a minimum in play that says, hey, here is the minimum expectation for you in order to stay employed. And that's how, in that way, once I know the minimum, if people are staying above that minimum, then I don't have to subjectively manage my people. I let the standards do it. And that allows me to objectively coach them and support them to their end. And that's why we put them in play. So, and our standards are not high. They're from the sales positions, our guys are paid hourly or base, and then they have commission. So as long as their commission or their sales outweighs what we're paying them an hourly, meaning there's at least they're break even with the company, then we'll be patient with them, which is much lower than a lot of companies. Generally, you want your employees to be able to turn a profit for your business. Somewhat tied to my value system, as long as they're breaking even and growing, I'll be patient with them on the front end.
Okay.
You had another question, Chin?
No, go ahead. I want to hear what you got to say.
So how did you get into the performance coach career field? And like, where do you get that consistent drive and motivation from?
It's funny that you say that. I get asked this quite a bit. And to be fair, I don't remember a time in my life in which I did not play that role in some form or another. Now, the first person that I learned to coach was me, right? So a lot of my teaching and there seems to be, I hope that I'm maturing and developing as a person, but the content I've been teaching for 10 years plus. Some of it much longer than that, but certainly some of the formulaical stuff that we're releasing right now. But there seems to be an appetite for that's interesting how people are responding to it. I think part of it is what I teach is integrated knowledge, meaning generally when somebody hears me speak, it's not just what they hear me say, it's also how it makes them feel. Well, the feeling that's coming across is integrated knowledge. In other words, I'm in alignment with what I am saying because I have done the work. And I'll exclaim on the front end. I probably don't need to for those who are in tune, but I'll exclaim on the front end if I'm going into a topic that I don't feel is integrated yet, where I don't feel like I have that done yet. But generally in the topics that we're talking about, these are things that in some cases I've been working on 25 plus years. And I know it's not theoretical knowledge. It's coming from a practitioner. It's coming from somebody who's put this to work. And so, once you do it yourself, it's easy to teach other people how to do it. And that's it. And that's which is like, no offense to anybody in their early 20s, because it would have likely have been me too at that time of my life. But it's hard for me to see, a 21-year-old life coach, because I'm like, what, like, no offense, but what the fuck do you know about life? Mm-hmm. Like, and it doesn't mean, first of all, if anybody's hearing this isn't me dissuading you from becoming a coach if you're 21 and that's what you're passionate about. That's not me dissuading you from giving advice because you're only 21. Just hold everything in context, right? It's like, there's a lot of life you just haven't lived yet. You don't know what you don't know, right? It's the same for me, right? I just turned 40 a couple of years ago, and I'm thinking about somebody who's 80 years old may listen to me and go, bro, like, you got theories. Like, I get it. I'm like, all right, it's just, life has a way of teaching us, and we begin to integrate that way. And so there's a lot of things that we learn or we think we know early in life but it's not integrated knowledge yet. At best, it's hypothetical or theoretical.
And what,
so, go ahead.
At what age did you see the uptick in tangible results in your life?
I mean, kind of all along the way, but I think the season would have been, what my fifth phase, between my fifth and sixth phase, which is 28 to 35. That was when a lot of things started to integrate rapidly. Like, now that doesn't mean, some people it may be later than that, and that's okay. And for some, it may be way earlier than that, and that's okay. It's like, just try to be careful, because you don't want to get stuck putting yourself into somebody else's shoes and thinking, well, if it went this way for you, it has to be that way for others. Mm-hmm. But my experience, which I think there's some good data behind this, 28 to 35 is a very formidable time where stuff really starts to kind of gel and make sense. But I was learning and testing those things out much earlier than that. So it's not like they just started to click on another level at that point.
You got something?
You have he has a video on his page about opportunity. I was gonna ask, what is one opportunity that you wished you took and one opportunity you wish you didn't take?
Oh man, that's a great question. I understand the heart of it. I think everything happens for a reason, so I have a hard time answering these questions. I don't generally spend a lot of time with regret, and life kind of unfolds as it should. But I was an avid hockey player when I was younger, and I never reached my full potential with it because I was raised by a single mom, and these are me giving excuses, but to create some context, just early life is a little bit challenging, and hockey is a very expensive sport. And the arena that I played in was 2 hours away. It was 2 hours west, a ferry ride, and 2 hours west. And I gave up on the sport, not because I lost my excitement for it. And I never really met my match where I got to a point where I felt like I was competing above my level. It just got harder and harder to do it. So sometimes I think about, what if I would have been, knowing what I know now, I maybe would have leaned in a little bit more, figured it out a little bit more, but it's easy to say, well, okay, well, you obviously, there was other things you valued more, or you would have pursued it. So I think hockey was something that, I probably wish I would have leaned into a little bit more when I was younger. As far as opportunities that I took that I wish I didn't, none really come to mind, because they all offered lessons. Like unfortunately, as you get older, you experience more and more loss. It's just part of life. And I've, at this point, I've lost both my parents to cancer and had to experience what that's like. And in part of that is like, I got really fascinated by death, and not in any weird way, just understanding like part of life is death, right? There's a beauty in that process. And so in that study, like I started studying and just reading information around last days and what people are thinking about, and just experiencing enough to me. And generally when people are looking back at their life, they don't spend a whole lot of time regretting what they did. They spend a lot more time regretting what they didn't do,
that's the bar.
That's like that hit me really hard. Losing, anyway, just through my life experiences, it's like, yeah, that makes a hell of a lot of sense to me. And it changed a little bit of how I approach things now, where I've always been more of a risk taker. I think you don't go into business if you don't have an inherent ability to take risk. But I keep that in the back of my mind, and I'm far more likely to say yes to something than to no for that reason. Which doesn't mean you shouldn't be calculated, doesn't mean that you shouldn't think through things, especially in business and in personal life, I would say too. You want to look for things that have asymmetrical risk to reward. There is a formula in which I make decisions, but ceteris paribus, you get through all of those things, and that's constant. It's like, take chances, especially it kills me when I see people in their early 20s in general, but early 20s who are already starting to become risk adverse. It's like, no,
You're
bro.
taking the most risk, right?
Right. You should be doubling down on risk. That's the time to go hard on your ideas, your business. You're like, spend like, there's, there's just, that's the time to do it. Like, now I'm assuming you're not married yet. I'm assuming you don't have kids yet. I'm assuming you don't have a lot of other responsibility. But if you're a single dude or a single woman right now, and you could live in a van if you had to while you're building your business, and like you don't have a whole lot of other responsibilities, this is the time to take risks. Go hard now, because it gets harder and harder the older you get, because you have more responsibilities. If you get married, now you're accountable to your partner. You have kids, now you got to consider your kids in those decisions. You know, as your life phases, you generally take on more responsibility and more things that you're accountable to. Like, you buy a house, well, now you got a mortgage you got to take care of. So as you kind of go through life, risk can be harder if you don't front load it. So generally, I would say to people, you know, when you're young, I think it's always important to take a certain amount of risk in life. That's where all the lessons are, as long as they're smart and calculated. But especially when you're younger, don't condition yourself to be risk adverse if you can help it. I get it, man. Like, things happen in life. Like, there's pains and things we go through that it's like, well, man, you don't know what I've been through. Like, I get it. I don't. And sometimes I can understand why somebody becomes more risk adverse and they seek more stability based on how they were raised or the things they went through. But all that to say, take chances, get up to bat, keep swinging, because there's good things that come on the other side of that. And I think I've seen too many people sell themselves short too early in life.
What would you say is the number one trait of a high performer and of a leader?
Well, high performers generally are willing to front load the pain. Like, there's a few things I could say on this, but just to keep it high level for the sake of our conversation, they're generally willing to front load pain. And there was you can look it up. I believe it was a Stanford test. And my dates may be a little hazy, but I feel like it was in the late 70s or early 80s, but you can look it up, called the marshmallow test. And, you know, without getting into all the details, because I might miss some of them, just principally what they were seeing is around motivation and the ability to control impulse. And so you may or may not have heard this study, but I'll say it real quick. Because essentially there was, a group of kids, and I don't exactly remember how many they were, but, and they put marshmallows in front of them. And I think they were like 8 to 10, somewhere in that range, but still pretty early in life. And they put marshmallows in front, a marshmallow, and I guess probably late 70s, early 80s, when marshmallows would have been all the jam. I don't know what it'd be now, Krispy Kreme donuts, something. Just think, whatever it is, a kid couldn't resist. I don't know if it's still marshmallows, but, and they told the kids, they were like, hey, listen, single marshmallow sitting on your plate in front of you. You can have it right now if you want, but hey, wait just 1 second. If you're able to wait, I believe the time was 15 minutes, but again, I could be wrong. Just conceptually get what I'm saying. If you're willing to wait 15 minutes, you'll get 3 marshmallows, not just 1. All right, so the kids fully explained the scenario and what was on the line, and then they put the marshmallows in front of them. And it seemed from the data that they broke up into 3 distinct camps. There was the camp that immediately, without thinking about it, ate said marshmallow, just boom, I'm eating it, not thinking about it. It's cool. I'll take the 1 right now, then wait, 10 minutes, 15 minutes for the 3. There was another camp, another third, that looked at this and thought about it and were like, and they didn't immediately go for the marshmallow. They spent the time to process the risk to reward or whatever was going on. They tried to control the impulse. And so they sat there and they waited. And I don't remember the average time, but I want to say it was like 5 minutes. They waited before but they still ate it. So distinctly different than the first camp. The first camp didn't even think twice, just ate it and we're done. Second camp, they at least waited and then eventually ate the marshmallow. And then the last camp somehow just sat there like, boom, I'm good. And they waited their time out and they got 3 more marshmallows on top of their other one, I think was the amount. Again, you can look it up. I think it was a Stanford test. This is the Google marshmallow test. It should all come up.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it twice, actually.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. So and then you know how it plays out. But the group that was super impulsive, life wasn't too kind to them, and they fit into a particular demographic of life. And the second group, they were a little bit more in self-control than the first group. They seemed to notably do better than the first group, but not nearly as good as the last group. And the group that seemed to know how to control their impulses and stay disciplined had the most successful lives by basic measures or standard measures. And so when I look at performers, they tend to fit into that camp. And there are exceptions, and there are some variants on that, but they generally have the ability to negate short-term desires and front load the pain. And they generally have a vision, something they want that means more to them than what they have now. And so there's a drive. And there's things you can do to push people, but ultimately you want to teach people how to push themselves, right? And that's, for a lot of that, is creating internal alignment with who they are. What is it that they really want? And a lot of that you're not going to know unless you start taking action, which is why going back to this whole idea of passion, I get really concerned about that statement, because it seems to have the effect of a lot of people sitting around not really pushing themselves or dedicating themselves to anything because they exclaim, I'm not passionate about it. Well, again, like I was saying earlier, a lot of passion shows up when you do the work. So it's like whatever your responsibilities are right now, whatever life is asking of you, whether it to be a good brother, a good dad, a good student, a good citizen, whatever it is, right? A good employee, a good entrepreneur, whatever life has for you right now, just be excellent at that. Just do your freaking best at that. Push yourself with what life is giving you now. Because I found, and there's Matthew, the book of Matthew, this is a principle, but who has more will be given, who has less will be given. Like your ability to use the resources you have really dictates whether you get more or less. And so it's like, we have a saying in our business, one of the walls in my business is just plastered, one of the big hallways, be so good you can't be ignored. Be so good, whatever you want, right? When you won't, the world won't ignore you if you're fantastic at what you do. And it almost doesn't matter what you're good at. That's the other thing that's hilarious. Like, think about this. And I love Tiger Woods, his story and his background and where he came from. So I mean this with all due respect to him, but he built himself a massive empire because he's really damn good at putting a little tiny white ball in a hole. It doesn't have a lot of real world application, right? Like that isn't it's amazing, right? Because we love human feet, we love excellence. And so that's not to take anything from his ability. I'm just saying, in practical skill sets, it's not terribly practical. There's not a lot of cases outside of golf where being good at hitting a ball in a hole is going to be useful in life. But he's built a $100 million plus, I don't know where the net worth is, but I don't think it's $1 billion yet, but it's a massive empire because he's really good at it. MJ's Michael Jordan, who's probably my favorite athlete of all time, debatable, but right at the very top. Same deal, right? It's like we watched him play like he was a god among men because he was really freaking good at putting a ball in a hoop. So it's like it doesn't really matter what you're good at, I would say, as long as it's ethical, moral, and sustainable. If you're really good at it, the world will reward you. So just whatever's in front of you, be really good at that. And it seems like more will come.
That's a bar right there. Jen, you got something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, because he kind of touched upon it earlier. So what would you describe your company culture like? Or what kind of company culture do you strive to set?
It's really there's a couple of different things that I would describe it as, but as a whole, with slight variances because of how we run our business, because of the first value, I would say it's a reflection of freedom, which my core values, freedom, truth, love, community. And so sometimes those words get confused or manipulated and not understood. And love certainly can sound so woo-woo at times, but those are my core values. So if you pay attention to how I teach, if you pay attention to what I teach, it's really around those ideas. What leads to personal freedom? What is empirically true? Lead with love, and it's all about others, community. And so my culture in many ways reflects that, but under freedom, you would see work hard, play hard, right? So a lot of the guys, when they first started my business, they're like, bro, you talk about freedom all the time, but my day is structured and there's nothing, I don't have a lot of freedom. Like, well, you don't get to freedom without first having structure. But it doesn't, like, sometimes we confuse what freedom is. With great freedom comes great responsibility, right? So the most free people tend to be the most disciplined people, right? That's what leads to freedom. And so very often the immature will think freedom means I do whatever the hell I want whenever I want. And again, the best lies are 60% truth. There is truth in that, but only when you've cultivated the ability to hold that kind of freedom. So still to this day, and probably my favorite movie of all time is Braveheart, which is a story of William Wallace. And that's I don't know if you guys have seen the movie. It's a bit older now, but fantastic. Still worth watching if you haven't seen it. But William Wallace loses his dad in a battle with the British. And he's a kid. He's 11 years old and he's angry at the world. And he wants to kill the British. He wants to conquer them so his people, the Scottish, could be free. And his uncle Argyle shows up and he goes, will you teach me to fight? And his uncle Argyle, and all of his wisdom, who was a philosopher, and there's some allusion, they allude to his background. And he goes, yeah, I'll teach you to fight, but I'm first going to teach you how to use this. Like, in other words, like, let's get this straight first, because once this gets educated, now you can go at it and bring effect to the world, but you have to first get this straight. So I teach my guys to conquer the world is to conquer yourself. If you want to conquer the world, you got to conquer you, because the only thing you really have control over in life is you. Right? Like, we all didn't drop into life in the exact same situation. We didn't. This is life. Like, nobody was guaranteed fairness and nobody was guaranteed an easy life. And depending on who you dropped in and where you dropped in at this point in time, your life was either easier or harder. But that does not negate your personal responsibility for how you show up and make the best of what was given to you. And the only way you can do that is to focus on the things that you're in control of. And as a whole, what you're in control of is you at best. And some of us are less good at that than others.
Yeah, I agree. Agency is definitely a powerful thing. So I agree with what you said about the freedom.
Yes.
Go ahead, Glass.
If you could have dinner with 5 people, dead or alive, who would it be?
Good question.
Yeah, I like that one.
I guess in order, probably Adam and Eve. However you think, whether it's an allegory or it really happened, they're real people. That'd be fascinating. King David.
Big Bible buff, I see.
Yeah, I like the Bible.
Nice.
I still have my Bible.
King James?
New King James, but yeah. Yeah. Then let's see, probably from there, big fan of Napoleon for a number of reasons. George Washington for a number of reasons. Benjamin Franklin, I'm going in order, for a number of reasons. Some of the newer guys, I feel like it's more easy for me to get energetically connected to, but Gandhi would be on that list. Cleopatra would be on that list. Martin Luther King would be on that list. Most of the books behind me are all history books. I'm a huge, different levels, but I'm a huge history buff. I love history for a number of reasons. There's
Malcolm X be on your list?
I don't know. I mean, not because, I mean, to me, in many ways, he was in this, thing about Malcolm X is his style, his approach doesn't resonate with me, but I don't necessarily, and which doesn't mean, by the way, to be clear, there's lots of people that I would love to have dinner with and talk to that may or may not agree, have the same opinion. So it's not necessarily just that they have to agree with me or I align with their values, because some of those people on there are things I don't align with on. But he doesn't pop as one of my favorites. I'll just put it that way, but totally respect his work and what he did. And I think he was in many ways just as important to Martin Luther and doesn't always get the same respect. I just like Martin Luther's approach. I'm a big fan of Power versus Force, and it's a fantastic book as well.
Is that the title of the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm adding that to the list. Power versus Force. That's a fire name. Who's it written by?
David Hawkins.
Got
Yeah.
What's the biggest piece of advice you would give to your younger self?
Trust the process. So much like I grew up growing up single mom. My mom raised 2 boys by herself. I don't know how. Shout out to all the single moms, because I don't know if things just get harder. I was naive to how hard it was, but yeah, it's not easy. So I had a certain frame reference to what was important and what values mattered early in life, just because a lot of the decisions my mom made early in life were based on money, which I think most people raised by single moms would know what I mean. So I took interest in business and politics very early in life because I recognized those were really 2 big levers that created freedom for a lot of people. But in that, so I've always been a savage student. I'm obsessed with reading. I'm obsessed with educating myself. But a lot of my early life, I believed there was some secret formula for success, and I just didn't know it. I believed either there was a certain amount of luck, or there was something else that was involved in success that I didn't know. And I think that hurt me in some ways, because I was a little bit more impetuous or a little bit more impulsive early on, because I wasn't looking for the process. I was looking for the result. And success is found in the process. Right? Success is a lifestyle, and that's why so many people don't find it. It's especially in our day and age, where people really judge what success is based on the Instagram reel, right? The life that people are presenting to others, and we think that's what success is. Well, at best, that's the fruit of success. The process of success is different, and there isn't, as a whole. Again, we don't all start off with the same challenges, and some of us start harder than others, but the principles of success are timeless, and they apply and work with anybody, and it's a process. And I could safely say with a high level of confidence that if somebody's willing to put in the work, they will get there, but you have to trust the process. And that's integrating knowledge, really understanding what are the traits of successful people, which is why anyway, that's why I would say, just trust the process, get comfortable in the process, understand that it's a lifestyle. And if you follow the journey and you focus on that, and I could say this with a high level of confidence, if you ask anybody who's hit levels of success in their life that they wanted, they would likely tell you who they became in the process was far more valuable to them than any one accomplishment. And that's the part that gets missed, because we're always chasing the result, the fruit, when there is no fruit without roots, right? There are no fruits without roots. And so we got to get our roots down first. And that's the process. That's the foundation. And so a lot of times we get impatient with that, and we keep chasing result, and it's not sustainable. And then keep in mind, what you condemn condemns you back. What you judge judges you back. What you honor honors you back. What you respect respects you back. And so I'm very concerned in our culture, yet I understand why, but we're demonizing successful people and billionaires right now in a way that concerns me on many levels. And it's not because, and these are things I'm going to unpack in future talks and videos, but it isn't because I don't think billionaires have a responsibility to give back. But to be fair, a lot of them are. And they just, for whatever reason, and I'm not about to become a billionaire apologist or try to lump all billionaires together and explain they're all doing this, but I know many of them, and they are giving back. They're trying to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And some of the ones that are doing this are the ones that are getting the most heat. And that's super interesting to me. So I find myself ended up becoming an apologist for the wealthy in a way that I did not mean to. simply because it really isn't anything about them. It's that I understand that if you disregard their success, if you disregard the process they went through, you're not inviting that into your life. And I don't find, like, I've never found, is that there's an old saying, those who are doing more than you or have done more than you are usually the last to criticize you, because they know what it means to go through what you've done. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's crazy how often I hear people criticizing some of the most successful people in America, who most of them did not come from wealth. Like 86% of millionaires and above in the United States are first generation. Well, that really fucks with the narrative that this is all old money and that the system is holding people down. It's like, no, like, I'm not telling you there isn't shit, like agency and structure. They both exist, right? And there's a balance between the two. But if you start actually digging into the numbers, it's quite enlightening. And you start realizing, like, wait a minute, this doesn't quite fit the narrative that I'm being told. Like, why is that? And my concern with it is not hurting the people that have found success. But by saying this shit, you're not hurting them. But the people that believe the bullshit that you're telling them and believe, oh, I can't do it, I don't have an opportunity, they're not a success because they worked hard and did the right thing, it's because of this and that. Well, you're hurting those people, because then they start believing it and they start believing they don't have an opportunity, they're not empowered, that they can't change their life. You want to see a scary world? Get people to believe that they aren't responsible for themselves and that they aren't important and they don't have control over their life. You want to create a fucking scary place to live? That's how you do it. And it's simply not true. There's too many counterexamples. So anyway, going back to my core tenet of freedom, got to get people to think right. When you start attacking people because of their success and you start making excuses for why they are the way they are and not recognizing the greatness in them, you're not hurting them, you're hurting you. Which I can say these things and at the same time recognize we got to do more. We need more equality and we need to bridge the gap more. But we don't do that through giving out handouts. When you look at society, that has never worked out long term. That's all bad on too many levels. You do it through education, right? If we could get people to think right, we don't have to tell them to do right. And my particular flavor, sometimes we perceive education to be another way to brainwash or indoctrinate people. And to be fair, it can be a mechanism for that. But my value, and if you pay attention to kind of how I speak and what I share on, my focus is far more on teaching people how to think, not what to think. And now, if you just take a lot of what's coming at you in the media in all different forms, and you filter through what is teaching me how to think, what is teaching me what to think, the Pareto's principle applies there. 80% of what's coming at you isn't teaching you how to think. It's telling you what to think. But you don't create free people by teaching them what to think. You create free people by teaching them how to think. And just as a simple example to this that maybe is obvious, but I don't think any of us are depending on our kindergartner teacher right now to know that 2 + 2 = 4, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we all get it, 2 + 2 = 4. But if our kindergartner teacher never taught us why and just said, no, just trust me, memorize 2 + 2 = 4. Well, that information isn't terribly useful. There isn't a lot of places in the world where just memorizing that is going to be useful. What makes that truth useful is understanding why 2 + 2 = 4. Because once you get that, you understand why 4 + 4 = 8 and so on, right? Mm-hmm. And now that becomes your truth, your understanding, not your kindergartner teacher. So if your kindergarten teacher came back, she was like, or he was like, you know, I messed up, I was wrong, 2 + 2 = 5, you would respectfully say, thank you for sharing your new knowledge. However, I can do the math and I recognize that 2 + 2 = 4. And I can't be controlled, manipulated, or misdirected because I can do the math for myself. That's the fruit of teaching people how to think, not what to think. When we teach them what to think, they get brainwashed into a particular ideology that they may or may not even understand. And they do it because that's what they were taught, not because it necessarily makes sense or works. They got to be, you know, that could be a scary process, right? Because if you start teaching people how to think, they get free. Well, free people you can't manipulate or control. They can be led, they cannot be manipulated or controlled. This is why education is so powerful. When I travel the world, and the biggest difference I see between people in different countries or different opportunities than the United States, and in the United States, we have our own set of problems. I'm not about to tell you we got it all figured out here by any means, but it's education and it's access to information, which is why if we can get people to think right, we don't have to tell them to do right. This is the work.
Thank you so much for this interview. You're the best. There's nothing much to say. Please subscribe, guys. 90% of you guys are not subscribed. Come on.